Welcome to Parev TV. We have a very special program dedicated to a very special, noble Armenian, a literary personality, a man who has left this world in a better position than he found this world. His name is Professor Agop Hacikyan, and I think the best way to tell people who I'm talking about is this book. It is Summer Without Dawn. He is the author of this beautiful book and many other books. He was born in Istanbul, Turkey in 1931. And the reason we're having this program today, because today, or in fact, tomorrow, which is July 3rd, marks the 5th anniversary of his passing. A very tragic loss. We all respect and love Agop Hacikyan. And joining me today is his son, Patrick Hacikyan from Montreal. Patrick, you cannot imagine how happy I am because I know with your participation we'll be adding a little bit more to what we know about Agop Hacikyan. The internet is full of information. We have different books here, My Ethnic Quest. We have a young man in the gray suit. I'm sure you're aware of these books. What
Yes.
can you tell us about you, Dad? What is it that you could add to this narration?
Okay. Well, me growing up with my dad it was a very tall intellectual figure for me and a very precise model for me to follow. I remember, well, the list of things I remember is endless, but more pertaining to his literary inclinations. It always had a very big influence in everyday life, where he would always evoke literary works of the past. And very early in my life, when I was a small boy, he already tried to implicate me in the first version of A Summer Without Dawn, because there was actually a first version that was aborted. And they started the whole process of writing the book over again. So the first version of this book, he had planned on centering it more on the Armenian genocide itself. And part of the plot was a group of children that were led in the wilderness, a bit comparable to what happened in the desert in Syria, although in this case it was on a mountain. And he would ask me, if you were led in this situation, how would you react? What would happen? So he was trying to make it a little bit more realistic. But this version did not subsist, and he wrote the version that we know today, his magnum opus, that's Summer Without Dawn.
What did he tell you about his childhood growing up in Turkey from 1931 to the mid 1950s when he left Turkey? This was a turbulent time for Turkey also.
Very much so. That's a subject that I only grasped later in my life, the complexity of the situation in Turkey. He actually was very fond of Istanbul, and he always wanted to bring me over there. Unfortunately, very unfortunately, I didn't get the occasion to do so. But he would talk to me about the positive things and the picturesque nature of Istanbul. But he would also talk, although very fleetingly, about the difficult situation of the minorities in Turkey and how it translated in the different events that are actually much more detailed in his book, My Ethnic Quest. And he was not, vociferously against Turkey as such. He just was very interested in the historical process of how it, and the impact that it had on those populations. And that subject, around the end of his life, became much more and more interesting to me, actually.
I was reading My Ethnic Quest. I was scanning through the book only yesterday. At one point, one of his colleagues set him up, I think, at the book presentation and asked him, do you, after 50 years abroad, do you feel Turkish? And your dad didn't like the question. And he said, listen, I like Istanbul, where I was born, but I never felt Turkish and never will feel Turkish. So there was this very, very interesting points he had to raise because he went through hell. I can use the word hell because, besides the genocide, the wealth tax and the
Exactly. Yes,
September 6th, 1955, there are so many dates.
This caused so many bankruptcies and caused horrid problems for the Armenians, and even I have some Greek friends which experimented the same type of problems, many minorities. But the Armenians, I understand that they have some, maybe the Armenians that live in Turkey today, a little bit more, but those who went through the ordeal that my father and his family went through, I understand that they cannot feel Turkish.
In one of his books, I have to bring up, besides My Ethnic Quest, I don't know if you've read all of his books. He wrote quite a few novels, but the Lamppost Diary, many people raise their eyebrows. Hey, hello, Hacikyan, slow down.
I very, very much enjoyed this book.
Really?
And also it has a certain passage about what happened in Turkey. I don't know if that's what you're referring to, the pogroms that happened in Turkey. There's a certain passage in that book that speaks very explicitly about that, but that's not the main the main passion of this book. It's more it's a little bit autobiographical in its nature, and it's quite funny even.
Thomas was very adventurous.
Yes, I never finished Thomas, his first novel. Thomas is the person from his first novel.
Patrick, what I don't want to drag this, but what is something you can tell us we don't know about your dad?
Yes, well, many things actually. Well, it's funny because many people, as we see in the world, many individuals who have very passionate careers, often when they end their career, their time is over in this world. Very often they leave. And this was the case for my father, whereas I saw him working very passionately on his labor of love, which was the Armenian question and his literary passion. And at one day, he came up with a copy of a manuscript and he gave it to me. And he said, "Finally, it's done. This is my final manuscript. I finished." And this was a book that he had started. It had many different names. That he had written it for quite a few years. It started to be called The Swiss Account. And then finally, it was the working title is, the final title is The Accident Makers. And so this is his final and unpublished book. And it's very intriguing, and I hope someday it can be published posthumously. What happened is he gave us his manuscript, and maybe 4 or 5 months later, I remember we were watching television and he saw Frank Sinatra singing My Way, and he sung it with Frank Sinatra, and the next day the hospital started. But he was aware of this process. It was it was painful, of course, but he was aware that it was a natural process.
So there is an unpublished book of Agop Hacikyan.
Yes, there is one. It's called The Accident Makers. I cannot tell you what it is about, but it does have to do with Turkey as well, and an American person who is the main character, who I suspect is inspired by the character of James Joyce, which was one of the favorite authors of my father. But in any case, I'm confident it will be published eventually, and we will tell you about it.
That's good news, Patrick. Thank you very much. This is another book I have here. I was referring to it this morning. It's such a heavy book.
Oh, yes, the anthology.
Every Armenian knows about this book. It's the heritage of Armenian literature. And it says, Agop Hacikyan, coordinating editor, Gabriel Basmadjian, Edward Franchuk, and Nurhan Uzunian. These people are really great people in Montreal who've done a tremendous job.
It's
a big book.
It's probably the best contribution that they did to the Armenian culture, because now this book is in the university circuits, and is a reference for the future.
It's a
So
beautiful book.
Mm.
Anything else in closing, Patrick?
Well, in closing, I can tell you maybe perhaps about hortensias, which is simply I don't know if this is an appropriate anecdote, but nevertheless, I'll tell you.
Your dad loved jokes. Every time we would sit on the table, he would start telling jokes. That's all he cared for. No books, no nothing, no turkey, no nothing, just jokes. He was a very lively person.
That's true. He did enjoy jokes. He went once to Armenia, and he was enthralled by the jokes that would happen around the table, and how people would break out in poems. They would spontaneously read poetry. Found that very wonderful. And at the end of his life, in his last days, my father would be in the house, and he would look at the garden, and there was hortensias, which are flowers related to hydrangeas. And he would watch every day and wait for them to bloom. And there was stalks from the previous years. Every year the hortensias bloom and they leave, and there is some stalks left, dry stalks, and apparently you should not cut these stalks, because if you don't cut them, they bloom more early. And I went and I cut them, thinking that I was doing a good thing. And he said, this is a terrible thing. You shouldn't have cut them. Now they won't bloom. And I was waiting for the day these flowers bloom to pass away. And so I regretted this very immensely. So now hortensias are a symbol of my father's passing away. But nevertheless, his books persist for the future.
Patrick, I'm sure you would like to hear how much we respect and love your dad. And I'm so happy we had this occasion to remember him on his 5th anniversary of his passing. He was truly a great man, and I just wanted you to know how much we respect him.
Oh, this is very much appreciated, and I appreciate everything you do as well for the Armenian community. Thank you very much, Mr. Abdul.
Thank you very much, Patrick. Enjoy the day.
Okay, you too.